Are you someone who always sees connections before other people do? Have you felt like you've always known there's a certain kind of intelligence that you have, that the other people around you maybe don't? You can see things other people don't see. You think about things other people don't think about. You've always been able to apply your intelligence, maybe not in the exact same way that your teachers wanted you to at school, but you knew that you had it. And you might have figured things out in school, done really well in school, made it into the workforce, only to find you are running into brick walls and weird social dynamics that you never could have anticipated. Rubbing certain people the wrong way, being told you're disrespectful or there's issues with your tone, that kind of thing. All the while, you're just trying to apply your abilities and your intelligence to do what's best for the team, for the organization, for yourself, sometimes even for the very same boss that is taking issue with you. If you're neurodivergent, ADHD, autism, or anywhere on the neurodiversity spectrum, some variation of this story is likely very familiar to you. Hi, my name is Isis Fabian. I am a neurodiversity researcher, speaker, and career coach, and I'm here to teach you about your mind and how you can best access your strengths and abilities in ways you never thought of before. So many of us go into the workplace or school settings or wherever it is that we're trying to figure things out, or family settings and friendship dynamics even, and we feel like we're stuck between two options. Either we try really hard to be like someone we're not, we try to emulate the people around us who are deemed normal and successful, or we act completely the way that we want to and find ourselves marginalized, dismissed, no access to friends, jobs, whatever. A lot of us feel like we're stuck between those two options. The problem with the first option is you're never going to be as good at being normal, quote unquote, as the people who naturally act that way. The people who show up with the traits that make them fit in so neatly to the existing paradigm, to the mainstream way of doing things, that's natural to them. It's not natural to you. And that doesn't make you inferior to them. It certainly doesn't make them superior to you. But you need to understand how to access your unique strengths and make them legible in your environment. Because if we go back to that binary of those two options, you look at the second option, which is just to throw your hands in the air and say, I don't care what anybody thinks. I'm tired of being misunderstood and misperceived. I'm just going to say things the way I want to say them, do things the way I want to do them, and I really don't care how anybody else takes it. Then you're also not going to find any kind of success. I often talk about pretending to be like neurotypical people or trying to fit in as being the worst apple in the basket, right? If you're surrounded by apples and you're actually an orange and you pour all of your energy into pretending to be an apple, the best thing you're ever going to be is the worst apple, right? Success in that framework is passing as an apple, and it's not going to get you very far, right? Even people who are really, really good at pretending to be apples, and again, I've worked with people across all different levels and industries, it ends up becoming such a big portion of their energy that's being dedicated to it that they can't perform on other fronts. They end up not having anything left for their families at the end of the day. And even if they continue at that point, they still reach a point of burnout or failing to actualize the career that they always wanted. So there really is no happy place at the end of that tunnel. And then rather than thinking there is this alternative where you simply can't participate because your true self is fundamentally incompatible with these environments, I want us to reframe our relationship with these environments as co-creators, right? As taking a kind of strategic role in how you perceive the way other people perceive you, rather than just taking that social and environmental feedback and again, trying to shape yourself into someone that you're not. I want to help you understand the environment that you're operating in and the unspoken rules of that environment, and then apply your strengths and abilities in unique ways to meet that environment the way that it is, but perhaps then stretch it and change it over time to be one that values the strengths you bring to the table and not just the very simple, very narrow way of working and communicating that is currently accepted. Now, the first thing you have to do, of course, is identify your strengths. And I'll go into greater detail in a future video about the process behind this. This is probably the most difficult part because you've been conditioned to only see yourself through the eyes of the mainstream kind of overculture of what's quote unquote normal and good and what success looks like. And so you've been conditioned to see your failure to adhere to that as just a failure, as a person, period. And your success at adhering to, again, that very narrow, very small definition of what good and normal looks like as the only version of success available to you. But as I'm sure you know, and have thought about before, no one who achieves, really incredible things in this world does so by acting like everybody else or thinking like everybody else or behaving like everybody else. And you might not be out here trying to be a big disruptor in the tech industry or a big inventor or innovator, but you still have to understand that you have a completely unique set of gifts, a unique talent profile that you bring to every setting that you come to. And so our challenge is, how do we access that talent profile and display it in a way that people start paying attention rather than completely misunderstanding what you're doing? So back to the apple analogy. If you're an orange pretending to be an apple, we want to take all that energy that's going toward pretending to be an apple and reallocate it toward showing what's great about oranges, right? What is so great about an orange? Think of it as if you're in a world in which no one's ever even heard of oranges before. They think the only fruit that exists is an apple, right? It's going to be hard for them to understand the concept of having to peel a fruit, right? That there's a whole different way of accessing what you have to bring. But if you put your energy toward that instead of toward pretending to be an apple, then you will open doors for yourself and opportunities, not to mention whole new reserves of energy that you have that's been wasted on pretending to be somebody that you're not. So what makes you an orange? What are the unique attributes and abilities that you bring to the table? Again, I will go into a deep dive on how to figure that out for yourself in a future video because it honestly could take hours to give enough examples and guidance to help you get there. I do have a course on Udemy, I'm not sure how you say it, called Neurodivergent Corporate Survival Guide. So if you want that now and you want like the custom workbook and everything, then you can go Google that. You'll find it very easily. I don't think it's that expensive. But just at baseline, what I mean here is you have been told there's a certain set of strengths and abilities that matter at work, right? And you've heard them over and over, right? Being organized, being on time, being a good communicator, being confident, right? There's also a whole bunch of other traits and strengths that can be super valuable in work environments, not to mention family environments and friendships, that just aren't talked about because most people in these work environments do not have them. And so it's on you to figure out what those special, unique abilities are that no one really thinks about because they're so rare. So I'll give you some examples. One that I find is very common in our community of neurodivergent people is the capacity for healthy conflict. Now, again, a lot of us are the opposite. We can't be in conflict at all. This is just an example, right? Those people will have different strengths they'll tap into. But healthy conflict means you don't mind when there's a disagreement. In fact, you want all that information out on the table. You want everybody on the same page. You don't like it when there's an elephant in the room, quote unquote, right? You want to name the elephant in the room. You want everybody to be clear about what exactly it is that they're saying and what exactly their motivations are. So most people in most workplaces cannot deal with conflict in a direct way. And you'll find that, for instance, you think someone thinks highly of your work, but then they actually are saying negative things about you to somebody else, or your manager gives you a bunch of negative feedback at the end of the year that you should have heard throughout the year, but you never heard, right? It's only when they're being forced to deliver that feedback that you're finally hearing it. And even when you're hearing it, you're probably hearing some really weird, watered down version of it that isn't even direct or actionable enough for you to actually, put it into practice. So if this is a skill you have, right, the ability to engage in healthy conflict, then rather than wasting time and energy and anxiety thinking through, oh, wait, how did that person perceive what I just said? Oh, I know this person's really sensitive, so I have to be careful how I blah, 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 blah. Instead, you can start speaking very clearly about your traits. And if conflict comes up as a result, you will be ready to deal with it in the moment, right? So you might say, hey, I'm a very direct communicator. I don't mean to hurt anyone's feelings. If I say something that impacts you negatively, please tell me, right? Please let me know. That's the only way that I am going to learn how to work with you better, right? So I need the feedback. Give me the negative feedback anytime. I'm ready. You don't have to sugarcoat it. Just tell me what the issue is. Tell me how I'm negatively impacting you. And then I can put that feedback into practice and improve our working relationship, right? You can start going out and saying that to people all the time, right? Just bring it up routinely, even repeating it to the same people, right? When you're in a meeting and you know you're about to say something that you're like, this is the kind of thing that's ruffled feathers in the past. I don't know why that happens. But instead of trying to predict it or figure it out or just silencing myself, I'm going to say, hey, I'm just going to ask this question because I want to understand how this change in our processes is going to impact these 6 other things that it's connected to. I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot. I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus. Just for the way that my mind works and the way that I solve problems, I need to ask this question. So if it ruffles any feathers, I apologize in advance. That is not what I'm trying to do, right? When you start talking that way and you start owning the fact that you can sometimes create friction with people and that you're ready to hear that negative feedback and you're ready to be in kind of open conflict. If someone's like, hey, what you did on this project was not okay, and here's why. If you're saying, hey, bring me that energy, then you are moving more into your own playing field, right? You're moving into the world of, okay, this is a strength I have. Most people around me don't have it, but they're gonna have to meet me halfway. And so if I'm asking for the feedback over and over and over, and nobody's giving it to me, then they're gonna go much easier on me for not reading their minds because I've made it very clear that that is not how my mind works, right? You have to be honest and authentic with it. You can't, use these kinds of statements about your traits as an excuse or a way to get out of things. You should be using it as an invitation for more feedback and more engagement and more, co-creation of your working dynamic. And again, this extends outside the workplace to your friendships and your family relationships. You're using this as a way to advance the objectives that need to be advanced while using your strengths and showing up in a way that you are confident and comfortable. And maybe the other person isn't confident and comfortable there, right? But now you're creating the opening for them to meet you halfway instead of constantly playing the game on their terms. And by their terms and they and them, I mean the kind of mainstream neurotypical stormtrooper mentality, whatever you want to call it, way of doing things, the existing traditional, workplace and our just collective American culture way of operating. Another example of how you might use a rare trait to your advantage in this typical setting is if you have strong pattern recognition skills. A lot of us do, right? So I see a lot of my coaching clients run into situations where you see a problem way before it manifests. You know it's going to happen, right? It's like the dominoes are set up to fall. You see what's going to happen at the end. You try to raise the alarm. You try to tell people, hey, this is going to happen, or this is bad, or, we need to solve this. We need to stop this. And you sound like Chicken Little. This is the missing piece for a lot of my clients. They don't know how to take this kind of high level perspective from the rest of the workplace, right? Because you think that everyone has the same pattern recognition skills that you have. You think if you explain the fact that the sky is falling and all the reasons that it's falling, these people are going to listen to you rather than just looking up at the sky and being like, it's not falling. You're just a complainer. You're just negative. You're just not a team player, right? You're just, too inflexible. I had one coaching client who was called inflexible a lot because she was always seeing these problems and pointing them out before anybody else could understand them. And so I use a metaphor of like, if you're in a house, imagine you're in a house and you're the only one who can see outside the windows. No one else even knows there's windows there. And so they're all going about their business, pretend that the house is the business you work in. And you see a monster just circling the house, clearly planning to come in and ruin everything, right? But if you start squawking about this monster and someone needs to go outside and do something about this monster before it comes in and messes everything up, they don't even know that windows exist. So they literally don't know what you're talking about, right? But that doesn't mean your alternative is to just say nothing and throw up your hands and just watch the catastrophe happen. You can still use your pattern recognition skills to the benefit of your team and your organization and yourself and your manager. You just have to do it strategically with the awareness and the understanding that the other people around you do not perceive things the same way you do. You have an advantage in terms of your perception that the people around you do not have. And so what I always advise people to do in this situation is to recognize the problem, understand it yourself, right? And instead of trying to convince everyone around you that something bad is happening, take the time to figure out how you are going to save the day when the bad thing finally starts happening, right? When there's actually a fire that everybody else can see. And this is what I mean about understanding the environment and the unspoken rules that you're operating in, rather than trying to understand all the individuals around you and how they think. One of I wouldn't even say it's the most common. This is just true in pretty much every workplace I've ever engaged with. And it's been many different workplaces and industries and companies of all different sizes. The people who put out fires, right? And that's a metaphor. For those who aren't good with metaphor, it means if something really bad happens, something very urgent, a big urgent problem really needs to be solved, right? The person who swoops in like Superman and saves the day, that type of person is the one who gets the most reward and recognition and who is seen as the most essential in these work environments. Now, I find that often, sometimes more often than not, the same people who stop these fires are the ones who started them in the first place, often through neglect. Sometimes it's benign neglect. Sometimes I wonder if it's intentional neglect. But there's countless examples of what this looks like. Just one quick example. One time I worked with someone who was on a team where there was another team they worked with that was a highly technical team. The people they reported to were not technical at all. And so what they would do is allow a problem to kind of metastasize in their code and pretend they didn't know anything about it. And then when they had to meet with their higher ups to show some kind of progress or some update, they would, at the right moment, say, oh my gosh, we just discovered this major issue in our program. They would talk about it in a way that the blame did not come back to them because they had the advantage of the technical skill set, and say, but we have a plan for how we're going to solve it. And they would, they would create the fire and then put the fire out. And a lot of their time was spent doing that, which meant that in reality, they were working very little, right? Because all of this was very controlled and very manufactured. So there are people out there that are doing it that way, like very intentionally, very maliciously, very selfishly. Most of the time, it is a kind of benign neglect. But what you can do if you have the pattern recognition skills is something, a little bit more altruistic, which is understand that when you run outside the house and you slay the monster on behalf of everybody else all the time, you're not doing what's best for the organization or the team or your manager or yourself, because you are now solving an invisible problem. You're spending important energy that you should be putting toward, visible work that everybody sees, solving these problems, and no one even knows these problems exist. And so if you have a manager or a leader who's creating an environment that causes these problems to happen all the time, and then you are taking care of them before they become a problem for that person or for their superiors, then they will continue to get rewarded and promoted in spite of the fact that they are a bad leader. And so what you need to do in that situation is learn to sit on your hands and use all that anxious energy to plan how, when this thing goes sideways, which it will, you're the only one who knows it will, how you are going to come in and mitigate as much damage as possible, right? At the moment that finally it is clear to everybody, right? The moment the monster comes in the house and everyone's like, oh my God, what are you going to do to save the day? Obviously, it will not be as efficient or as optimal as what you could have achieved by proactively solving the problem. And that is a hole that so many of us dig ourselves into, is we become essential to the functioning of a team, and the team never even knows it because of this pattern recognition skill. So this is where you have to use your skill, remain true and authentic to yourself, but also recognize the limits of what you have control over, what you have influence over, and what you simply have to accept. So if you simply have to accept that you are operating in an inefficient environment that allows problems like this to materialize, then the best way to solve that long term is to let the problem flower in front of everybody so that you can finally solve it in front of everybody. Now that everyone's on the same page that there is a problem and they want to prevent that problem from happening again, now they will listen to you about the changes that you propose, the additional head count that needs to be hired, whatever it is, in order to prevent those problems in the future. And at the same time, you're actually getting recognition and reward for your work and your contributions, right? So that's another example of having a trait that actually can manifest as friction in these environments typically. You're Chicken Little, you're always asking questions that people are like, why are they asking these questions? They must be trying to undermine me because they don't realize your pattern recognition is kicking in and that's where the questions are coming from, right? So instead of it being a weakness, which is how it will be naturally treated, like most of these special traits and strengths, now you're using it as an actual strength. You're using it as a competitive advantage on your team. So that's just a quick rundown of how you can think about your traits differently, right? Again, in a future video, we'll get into more strategies for identifying what those traits are if it's not clear to you what they are. But for now, what I want you to take away from this video is seeing yourself as an orange who's proud to be an orange, right? No more pretending to be an apple, no more being the worst apple in the basket. Now we're going to be an orange and we're going to help people see what is unique and special about an orange. And we're going to look for those opportunities where we see ourselves encountering friction, being routinely misunderstood and misperceived, pulling our hair out because people don't understand what we're trying to communicate or the problems that we see, right? Look for those places in your relationships, in your workplace, and realize there might be a deeper trait, right? It's not that you're rude. It's not that you're unfocused, right? It's not that you are looking at the wrong things or you're too in the weeds, right? It's that you have these deeper traits. Other people are labeling them for you and they're coming from deep inside the box. Your mind isn't an inside the box mind, it's an outside the box mind. And so you need to ignore the labels that they are putting on you, figure out what the deeper trait is that's at play. You don't have to label it a positive or a negative trait, just figure out what the trait is, okay? And then see all the other ways you might be able to leverage that trait that you haven't explored yet because you've been so busy trying to act like other people instead of figuring out this new superpowered version of yourself. I hope that was helpful. Again, I'm Isis Fabian. I'm here to help you discover your neurodivergent strengths and survive and thrive at work and in the world as the amazing, unique, authentic person that you are. I hope this video was helpful. I'll see you next time.